Roberta Schwartz is a powerful, strong woman who is the Chief Innovation Officer at Houston Methodist. She has broken many barriers through her many endeavors in the STEM field. Into the health field.
So I started candy striping in hospitals when I was 13. And I had a family history of being involved in healthcare. My great uncle, who is basically my dad died when I was very young. My great uncle started out as an administrator in a hospital in the Great Depression.
Oh, wow.
So he was actually doing a chemistry degree and couldn't afford to continue in school. And so he dropped out and became a billing clerk in the Health and Hospitals Corporation in New York City at the time of the Depression.
Oh, wow.
So really amazing long history. And my stepfather was a doctor, but I began to volunteer at a hospital called North Hills Passavant Hospital in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, when I was 13 in middle school. I started volunteering on the floors. I did not like the whole doctor and nurse part. I didn't like the whole blood and sticking needles and doing all kinds of very direct, hands-on patient care. And at the time, I didn't know what else you could do. So I thought, well, if I'm not doing that, then I guess I'll run it. And so no one quite knew what to do with me until eventually I got on a very clear track into healthcare administration.
So, what was degree?
So I did my undergraduate I went to a liberal arts school. So my undergraduate degree is actually in psychology. But I took a lot of healthcare psychology and healthcare sociology classes, as many as I could find at Barnard, which is the women's college associated with Columbia University. And then I did my master's in healthcare policy and administration at Johns Hopkins and my PhD in healthcare policy and administration at University of Texas.
So what was your extracurriculars? Like, what did you do outside of school and volunteering?
Well, volunteering for me is a big extracurricular, and if you ask my kids, it is I always tell them, Schwartz is volunteer. It's what we do. And that was what my mom led me to believe. So I was really amazing at licking envelopes for the League of Women Voters and the National Council of Jewish Women. So, believe it or not, played flute and was in the orchestra and even got to the point of studying with someone from the Pittsburgh Symphony.
Oh, wow.
And then realized that what they told me very clearly is you either make it your life or you give it up. I went for the giving it up part.
So, you playing flute, did that have any impact on your discipline?
Well, my mother had impact on my discipline. So whether it was practicing or it was doing your homework, the answer to schoolwork is pound the pavement and do your work. So we'd come home from school and we'd have a snack and then we'd practice our instruments and then we'd do schoolwork and we got a half an hour of television and then it was time for bed.
Oh,
it was
wow.
a very strict household.
So you are Chief Innovation Officer at Houston Methodist. What exactly does your job entail?
So I actually have two different jobs, and each of them are about 50% of my time. So 50% of my time, I get the honor of running a hospital, and the hospital's about 1,000 beds, about 7,500 employees. And I get to set the direction and run the operations for the hospital. And then the other 50% of my time, I lead the innovation activities for our system. And so I'm constantly looking to disrupt the way our current operations are done. So I almost try to fix myself. So I'm really taking new products, new technologies, new ways of doing things through digital technologies and apply them to our business. And then after I figure out if that's a better way to do things, then I have to change my whole operations to work with new technologies.
So, what was like the biggest change you have done in the past 10 years of?
Well, I've only been doing the innovation activities about 2, so thank you for giving me credit for 10 years. But let me give you an easy example. So it used to be that when we went to a patient and we were going to tell them about their surgery, we would come into the room, if you can picture, with a folder.
Yeah.
And it had all kinds of printouts. And it would say, when am I allowed to drive? And when should I stop eating? And, right?
Yeah.
I mean, very
like
standard.
Aftercare.
Yeah. Or if you go to a new school or you go somewhere, right? They give you a packet of information. So we took that packet of information with a company called CareSense, and we broke it up into bite-sized texts. And so when it was time, when the majority of people were asking the question of when am I allowed to drive, was 1 week after surgery. So 1 week after surgery, we texted you and said, you're probably wondering when you're allowed to drive. Here's the answer. Rather than the teaching way in advance. Kind of teach like when you need the teaching. And what we found is we had much better outcomes. So we had much better adherence.
So, with you being a doctor, and most of the time it's usually Dr. and Mrs., have you ever been like mistaken as
all the time?
The Mrs.?
All the time. And I don't care. Labels are completely unimportant to me. In fact, I don't respect anybody who walks up to me and says, it's doctor. And I'm like, bless your heart. Mainly because if you think about it, one of the things that I am the most proud of, I say it all the time, is that everybody knows me as Roberta. Because I don't want a distance between me and anybody I work with. I want them to be able to approach me no matter who they are, and I think that's the culture I feel like I built.
When you came to Methodist, what was your title?
Executive Director. 20 years ago now.
Oh, wow.
Almost.
Methodist just had their centennial celebration in 2019. You, I understand, played a major role in the festivity planning. What was the activity that you were most proud of?
I have to say the whole year was fun. But every year at Methodist has been fun for me, so it's not quite fair. But from the beginning of the year when it started to all of the celebrations that we've had to celebrate our history, like I love the videos that really have gone into the history of the Fondren family, or the history of Walter, or A. Frank Smith, and all the different historical figures. That's probably been my favorite part, is realizing this deep-seated history. From choosing the name of our administrative building to be named the Josie Roberts Building, after one of probably the woman who saved Methodist from going completely bankrupt and ending, to the documentary screening, which was incredible, to the book Imagine Dragons. So the celebrations, the gala, which was the big fundraising gala, 2,500 people.
Wow.
At Minute Maid Stadium. On the one day where it was like 35 degrees.
Yeah,
and they don't have heat.
Yeah.
And it was a winter wonderland, and it was incredible.
Wow.
Beautiful. So I enjoyed everything about the year, but the question for me now is, how am I going to make 2020 as great as 2019?
So Houston Methodist is, I want to say, for every Houston team, they're their sports.
Well, we take care of the Texans and the Astros. We have taken care of the Dynamo in the past, and always a few Rockets, but primarily the Astros and the Texans. And the Rice baseball teams, all the Rice sports teams, I think.
So the question off the sports medicine is, as the CIO, how do you plan to improve how the athletes are treated?
So we actually we have a very large kind of sports medicine program that looks holistically at how to keep them in their peak performance, not just treat them when they're sick. And whether that's our sports trainers, our athletic program, our PTs, really working with them to optimize their performance. We do the same thing actually with performing arts, the ballet and the symphony and other areas. We've really kind of looked at optimizing performance, because if you think about, someone who plays, they're doing this all the time, so they have a lot of problems, fingers and carpal tunnel and arthritis. So we work with people to optimize health, not just treat illness. But when people need us and we have to treat illness, we hope to be there for them.